Welcome to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast, where we explore real leadership stories and strategies to inspire meaningful action and purpose. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, this podcast is here to help you lead with intent, build trust, and strengthen relationships in your organization. I'm Eric Savickas, bringing over 30 years of leadership experience from my time as a retired U.S. Army officer, university instructor, and now currently as a leadership coach working with the fire service. Today, I'm joined by Chief TJ Steck, Fire Chief of the Elizabeth Protection District here in Colorado. Chief Steck has dedicated over 3 decades to the fire service, beginning his career in the early 1990s, and then under his leadership, Elizabeth Fire has been recognized for its innovation and service excellence, culminating in 2024 when the department received the J. Evan Goulding District of the Year Award from the Special District Association of Colorado. That same year, Chief Steck was honored as the 2024 Fire Chief of the Year by the Colorado State Fire Chiefs. Chief Steck's been prominent advocate in addressing critical challenges such as firefighter recruitment and retention, particularly in rural communities. We'll delve into his leadership journey, discuss how he navigates high-impact challenges, and explore the role of emotional intelligence in effective fire service leadership. Chief Steck, welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to have you here today.
Hey, thanks, Eric. It's good to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on, and wanted to thank you personally for your contributions to our fire leadership series we did with this. Last time I was able to see you, you did an exceptional presentation on leadership for us. So I
Thank you. I,
appreciate
I certainly appreciated the invite, and what a great group of folks on that call that night. So let's start if we could, and I do this with everyone that I talk to. I would love to, and I'm sure that our listeners would love to hear what your story is. How did you get involved in the fire service way back when? And what are some of the things that have stood out in your career?
that's an interesting question. I typically, like we were discussing, that a lot of these chiefs, they grew up in the fire service. They got to grow up in a fire station with family or be part of it. I'm actually completely the opposite of that. I have nobody in my family that's fire service. I'm not even sure why I stopped by the fire station to start one day. What I will tell you is this: I was born and raised in the community I'm working in now in Elizabeth, Colorado. It was a great community to grow up in. A lot of fun, but as a small community, I was a terrible kid and I caused a lot of trouble in this community. Did some not so cool things as a kid and got to learn some lessons from that. As most people in rural Colorado or rural parts of America know, you tend to know the police chief, you tend to get to know your sheriff, and I got to know them quite a bit, which was fun. But I never even thought about being a volunteer firefighter. I never even considered it as I was growing up. Believe it or not, Eric, I was going to college to become a landscape architect. I was going to design golf courses for a living. It didn't work out. Hated college. Didn't finish college when I was young. One day decided I was talking to a friend that was a volunteer firefighter. He said, "Why don't you come by and see it?" And I went by and see it. I was like, "Wow, I'm going to do that." And it was on a total whim that I got into the fire service.
And what did you think when you started? Was that like immediate? Was it an immediate like match for what you're passionate about and some of the skills that you had, and then you could see how that translated through action as a volunteer, or was it more of a slow burn for you?
No, I drank it right away. Like it was immediate that I knew what I wanted to do. I had a very pivotal part in my late teens when I had decided to join and become a volunteer firefighter. I went boating with a city firefighter, and we were boating through some mutual friends. And this guy had a beautiful car and a boat, and had all the toys. And all I remember being out on that boat with that guy is, man, this guy's got it all, and he's a firefighter. That must have gotten him where he needed to be. So I didn't have those original community drive portions to be that volunteer that served your community. What I saw is I need to go do this to become a career firefighter. So I had different motives.
And at what point does a volunteer firefighter, specifically in your case, become full time and paid?
So I worked about 4 years in our organization, in our department back then. So this was 1990. It's been 35 years in the making, almost 36. Back then, our organization was handling everything just fine with community volunteers. We were all responding to the stations like we used to do. And we started getting busier. Call load was going up and volunteerism was dropping. People were going to less calls because they were getting burnout. And so that's when our organization said we have to start replacing our volunteers with at least daytime, full-time positions, and that's how my career started. One day they sat me out after a training and said, we think you should probably quit your job and come work for the fire department, and didn't even have to go through a testing process, which was
Oh,
amazing.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I want to come back um, to specifically in your career, other moments in your career in a second. But I'm curious, how does it feel starting as a firefighter in an organization and moving all the way up through the ranks and getting promoted, especially into leadership positions where one day you're one of the guys, and the next day you're in charge of folks. Like I was doing a workshop at West Metro a couple weeks ago, and I said, compared to my experience in the military, I think you guys have it much harder than I did from a leadership perspective, because when we get promoted in the military, you're moving, you're going somewhere else. And on day one in that new organization, you're wearing your new rank or whatever position you got promoted into. And that's your fresh start. They don't know you the day before as lieutenant, if you're now captain or whatever the rank and position may be. And I think for you that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and anyone in the fire service, when you're on the line one day as just a crew member, and then you get promoted, and now you're supposed to be this person that's the leader, it's got to be more difficult, especially if everybody knows you as TJ.
When you put that into perspective, that means a lot. You're right. How nice would it have been to get promoted and go to a different group of subordinates that you could lead? That didn't happen, and I gotta give my dad credit. My dad was one of the smartest men ever, and he's given me so much good advice. But when I called him and I said, "Hey, Dad, I just got promoted," the first time, you'll never guess what he said. He said, "Well, that's cool, son. But say goodbye to your friends." And I was like, "Dad, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous." But the reality was, it was kind of true, right? You had to separate yourself from that peer-based friendship at least a little, to
Uh-huh.
where you had to stop going to the Sunday barbecues, and you had to stop having drinks with everybody because you had to be held to a little bit higher standard.
Sure.
And it took a while for me to embrace that and to evolve to it.
Yeah, it's definitely hard, and it does get lonelier the higher you go, right? If you're a company officer, you have at least the other company officers as your peers, and maybe that becomes your core friend group outside of work, and then you go up through the ranks before you know where you are. You could have no friends at this point, right?
Well, it depends on your leadership style. And a lot of in the last 35 years, I've learned that you can have some friends, but it depends. It's on a different friendship level, and
Sure.
and so you have people fighting for you for sure, and you can fight for your friends, but you definitely have to be consistent in that.
Well, and I think the hard part with that, and I was also I mentioned this in workshops as well, is I get pushback like, okay, you're telling me, Eric, that as I promote, I've got to be more understanding of who I associate with, and I can't isolate people on my team if I go hang out with this one group of people. But they assure me, well, but I know where the line is, and I know how to manage that, and I do that well. And I push back to their pushback and I say, yeah, but perception's the thing, right? What if you got that one firefighter that happens not to get promoted, or that you have to maybe unfortunately give a pip to, and in the back of that person's mind, he or she is thinking it's because I'm not on the home team. I don't hang out with the captain or with the lieutenant. And I think that's where that you may do 100% of the things right, but if perception starts to creep in, then it's a losing battle.
No doubt, perception is such an evil twin, right? And if you think about it, we see this all the time where if every and we have a saying here our organization, everybody can be friends until it's time to discipline. And that one time that you have to create a disciplinary action or corrective action to somebody that you've been very friendly to, that changes that relationship forever, no matter what. Even if professionals can say it doesn't, it does indirectly no matter what. And that's one of the effects for sure.
And I think that's also probably the harder thing about the fire service than in the military as well is you guys spend at least up to the company level one third of your lives with that crew and those people, and you get to know each other so intimately that it's sometimes hard to be the person that's, taking a step back a little bit or creating a little separation there when you're on the same schedule with your crew and your families are on a similar schedule and you cook out together and do activities and your kids know each other. I just imagine that just being so much pressure there that it makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, and you really have to find that balance, right? Because if you don't spend some of that personal time, that family time with them outside of workspace, then they start to think that you're truly separating yourself or segregating out, and then you see that balance. It's a healthy balance for sure, but it's one that we've struggled with for many years. Most leaders do, trying to find that balance.
Do you have any advice that you give your newly promoted officers or folks that are trying to figure out what that balance is? Do you have any advice for them that you pass on?
Well, I have a lot of advice for them, but I stick to one thing. And I truly think if, as new officers, we can figure out how to be humble human beings. And, we all talk about the leadership traits and every leadership program we go through where, we deal with, let's identify 10 great leadership traits that we have. And everybody has the same ones, right? Consistency, humility, accountability, all of the ones that we talk about. But the humility component of that is so powerful to me because and this was a lesson learned, Eric, that I had early on as newly promoted officer. I remember the people in my organization going, "Oh, now you're too big for your britches. You got this promotion." And I didn't understand that at the time, but I was trying to project a kind of a cocky, I'm the supervisor, I'm the leader now, I'm going to take care of business attitude. And it wasn't working. People didn't want to hear it. And what they thought was, "Oh, you got a different color hat and you're jamming us up." It took me a long time to learn that humility is one of the best traits a leader can have. To
Mhm.
understand that you can't make everybody happy, to understand you're not going to know every answer, but just to be able to have people and rely on people to answer those questions for you made me a stronger leader than the one where I was puffing my chest. And that was a big lesson when I first got promoted.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were really understanding of the people side of your business, right? Like you could have simply been promoted, put on the bugles, wear that new rank and say, "Guys, the task is still the task. We're going to do it." And certainly that's important, but if you're not tapped into not only understanding yourself, but understanding everybody else as human beings, then I think you're falling short. And it sounds like you did a pretty good job with that.
I don't know if we do great jobs, but learning, right? Learning lessons every day is where it really pays off. I will tell you on the friendship side of things in this organization, you have to have at least a couple of people that are willing to tell you when you have a problem, that are not afraid to come to you and say, "Dude, you're about to jack that up." And I think if you have those people, and I've had them, your confidants in the organization that can be like, "Hey, with all due respect, you're going down the wrong road." What an amazing asset to have that you when you can trust that and see that, because there have been a few times where I've made a decision and stuck to it and people were like, that was dumb, don't do that again. Thank you. It's but you have to be able to listen, right? You have to be able to hear that and look beyond what your brain is telling you.
Speaking of the deeper human connections, this month I'm talking about emotional intelligence in some of my content and materials. What are your thoughts on emotional intelligence in general as part of leadership and that self-awareness that the leader has to have, and then awareness of others and where they're at, and maybe leading with some empathy? Is that a concept that's been a hard lesson for the fire service in general because that starts to get to more squishier things? We won't even talk about vulnerability, but you get to some of those squishier things and there's pushback. Or has it been just under the surface there with really good leadership in general as long as the fire service has been around? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
So honestly, Eric, I'm not squishy other than physically I'm a little squishy, but beyond that, I'm not one of those squishy ones. I'm one of the people that are like, why are you feeling that way? Like, I don't understand why this is a problem. But uh, that I think the industry itself is changing, and it is doing a good job of understanding the different emotional and intelligence based factors that are in this response. And they are changing at a dramatic rate. And I think we're doing a good job at it generally. But there are some organizations or some gatherings and some, I call them cults out there that that are trying to fight that fight and trying to keep it that leathery old, you're not a firefighter if you're not salty and not making, not tough, and all of those things they talk about. And so I think even leaders like that may still have a chance if they stick to one thing and one rule, because I'm typically not as emotionally or intelligently capable as others in my age group. But I think of it as situational awareness. So if I can take it back to my rules or my rules of engagement or my ethics, situational awareness is much easier for me to understand. It came from I don't know if you remember that term, obviously, for the military, but the
Yeah.
pilots, the airline industry taught us that years ago when they started crashing airplanes because the captain was the only one that could make a decision. And when they started to realize that everybody else has the ability to have input to make a good teamwork, that's that situational awareness that we need to be focusing on. You can use the same term and be a tough, salty guy or an old person like me and say, I'm still aware of my surroundings just by looking at what's going on around me, even though I may not be able to relate emotionally to it.
Sure, sure. And I think a lot of people, I think they get hung up when emotional intelligence has that word emotional in it, and they think it's like, it's the hugs, and nothing against hugs, right? I know that's a
I
thing
like
in the
hugs.
fire service. People love hugs, but they think it's like all of the bad emotions and the sadness, and maybe you go take a knee over there because you're struggling a bit, which I'm sure that goes into it. But I think it comes down to, are you connecting with your people in a way where they feel like, oh, the chief's got my back here, or the chief understands, or the chief gets it, right? Like, and it can be a silly little example, like one of the crew members goes out and buys a brand new truck over the weekend, right? And they pull into the parking lot with that truck. You can be leader A, that's like, okay, time to get to work and ignore all that and be like the robot. Or you can be something like, hey man, that new car smell is something else, isn't it? Right? And you just say a little comment like that. And this has nothing to do with being sad or being upset or being angry. It's a happy emotion. That person's over the moon about buying their new truck. And you connect with them by making a comment that lets them know you get it. Right? Simple as that. Right? But to that person, and you can probably put yourself in so many situations when you were coming up and you had a particular leader that's just like, man, this is hard. I'm going through something. We're still going to do the job. I'm still going to go put water on fire, but this leader understands me, right? That's all it is.
Yeah, without question. And it makes a big difference in the way people respond to you, and it makes a big difference in the loyalty. We've been starting to see a lot of, I don't know if you've seen these, we've been seeing a lot of these studies coming out now where salary and benefits and compensation are actually less important
Hmm.
in careers or in employment than a good culture or a caring culture or a sense of loyalty. And that's interesting because we thought it was going the other way, right? We thought it was just, we got to just keep paying them more, keep paying them more, and they'll stay around. But what we're finding through these studies, especially post COVID, is that these people are wanting to find a place to land and to be with and to be part of. And that's going to be important for us in the future.
It's so funny. You probably, and I saw a poll or a survey that was taken a while back. I forget where it was from, but it said that, like, you can ask people, what's it going to take to make you happier here in the organization? And inevitably they all say, you just give me a raise, you pay me more, I'll be completely happy, right? But the fact is, they get the raise, and come the next day, next week, next month, what have you, they will feel the exact same way as they felt before if all that other stuff that you talk about isn't there.
Absolutely. Sense of involvement, a sense of reward for being there. I mean, that makes a big difference.
Speaking of keeping the best people in the organization and wanting them to feel valued and thrive there and not decide to go somewhere else unless it's a great opportunity. Of course, you want those people to go pursue good things. But how do you retain folks at Elizabeth Fire? Do you have a particular secret sauce maybe or something that goes into it to, because I would imagine in a lot of rural departments that it is a struggle, right? Like they maybe get drawn into, once they get their certs, maybe drawn into larger departments or just maybe people get interested elsewhere.
Yeah. So my delay is kind of haste, but I'll tell you this: we're pretty good at recruiting in our organization. In fact, I'd say we're better than most. We have a good organization. People want to come here. It seems like a solid organization. Very proud of that. We kind of suck at retention. A lot of people appreciate that term. We suck at retention because that's a TJ term. The fact of the matter is, retaining our different levels of employment, our career members, we're able to retain many of them and do well. However, we're like every other organization in the United States where we're bordering an agency that's paying $20,000 to $30,000 a year more than we are. It's hard to keep people if they're just based on pay. So we know that, so we have to build this culture of comfort and accepting, understanding, listening, all of the things that we build in our cultural group to try and make up for that lack of pay. But our where we really suck at retention, Eric, is keeping our reserves and our what we call volunteers or reserves, not because they're unhappy here. In fact, most of our reserves that leave us are very happy through our surveys. They just went on to another organization, got hired, and we're becoming an organization where we're well known for putting out quality people that the metro areas or the I-25 or I-70 corridors can start to pull from, knowing that they're getting some decent people that have been vetted through. So we actually have had to embrace this puppy mill mentality of we're bringing folks in, we're training them, we're building them culturally, we're doing what we can to make sure that they're really good quality firefighters, and then we're sending them off to their next level, which is it's bittersweet. We're tired of doing that, but we're also embracing the fact that that's what's bringing them in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a catch 22.
Besides being that pull from the larger departments with the things that you can't compete with, the money and some of that other stuff, is there anything that you do well in the department that makes people wanna stay besides those factors that you can't control? Like, maybe as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm reflecting on my time when I ran an ROTC program at Eastern Illinois University, and when I first got there, our numbers were low, fairly low, and there was increased pressure every year to commission a certain number of people. And so the plan at the time was we lower the standards, we make things optional, we make it so people enjoy being here, and then we contract them into the army. And I said, what if we ratcheted up all the standards and we made this an organization of excellence that people wanted to be a part? Nobody wants to be part of an average organization. They want to be part of an excellent organization. And what if we made things just difficult enough where there was that competitive spirit and people were fighting to be here rather than us convincing him to stay? And I just was reflecting on that as you were talking. Do you do anything there at Elizabeth in that spirit of like, hey, let's make this an organization of excellence, and maybe we don't have to fight so hard to have people leaving?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. Everybody wants a sense of eliteness in their lives, right? They want it to be just a little bit better, whether we think it or not. We want it. We're a little competitive in that nature, and so I do think what you said is right on. The higher the quality of the organization, the more people will want to come here, and there's plenty of ways to do that in an organization. I think we're good at it sometimes. Sometimes we suck at it, but we've created a document called the Chief's General Orders. And general orders, as you know from the military, are very clear, sometimes global orders, but it's basically if you do nothing else while you're here, if you only do these things, you're going to be just fine. And it gives everybody a clear understanding culturally of what we're like and what we expect. And it's not like all of them are, make sure that your gear is perfect at every, level. Some of that's there, but it's also, hey, let's treat every customer like they deserve to be treated. Those basic rules of thumb, if you will, that puts us above our organizations around us, makes us kind of the go-to for agencies. And whether anybody wants to admit it in the fire service, we're all competing for the same people. So
Sure.
you want to be the one that's a little more shiny, a little more colorful, or most importantly, Eric, I think, is that people are comfortable coming to. And if you can make that first impression or that first 2 weeks of them jumping in and applying, even the application process being well organized, all of those
Mhm.
things that are first impression based, I think you end up taking more people or getting them when you need them because they see a good organization.
And then when they get there, they see everybody else in the organization and they look into their eyes and they're all bought in and they have that spirit of whatever it is, the pride in the patch on their shoulder or the badge that they wear, the job that they're doing, the community that they serve, like, and all of that just becomes like it just all snowballs and builds,
And
right?
it's all of a sudden becomes a sense of eliteness.
Sure. Where do you guys, you mentioned your recruiting isn't so much of a problem. Where do you get most of your folks out of?
So we get a lot just by word of mouth. A lot of people that are testing for fire departments or wanting to get into the fire service, similar to like what I was doing, they just start talking to each other, or they have somebody that they know. Some of them are working for private ambulance companies or other small departments that are going, "Hey, why don't you come try Elizabeth? They're pretty cool." So we don't do a lot of advertising. We
Mm.
usually have enough applicants based on just that alone. Like I said, we're pretty good at that. Our problem is retaining them and keeping them here and having a promised future or an available future to them so they don't start looking elsewhere to further their career. Because we're a small combination department, that's where our limit starts.
Do you have Are there any feeder programs near you? I know there's Ames up north and out west is, or not west, but like in the metro areas, Red Rocks. What do you have any programs that have fire science or just basic Fire One Academy stuff that you can get folks out of?
Yeah, absolutely. And those colleges, if nobody's doing this, you should be. But those colleges out there, they're really good about inviting fire departments in to recruit. You can talk to them at a lunch break in the academies, or they actually have days where they'll bring in a kind of a career day thing where they'll bring in firefighters from or fire departments from around the area. And I think that works pretty well. We've done that in the past when we were not as happy with our numbers
Mhm.
and it did produce the local colleges around here. There are some really rural agencies. Yeah, sorry about the traffic noise here, but some really rural agencies out there that may not have those same opportunities because the further you get out, so the farther away it is, the harder it is for those people to have to commute out there to a volunteer organization. We can talk a little bit about that, I think, later if we can, but um, I think the reality is everybody's fighting for these folks, and the more the more creative you get, the better chance you're going to have at snagging them before anybody else.
Would you say, and I would love to hear more of your thoughts on it if there's more on your mind, but would you say that a good path for a high school kid coming out right now would be to volunteer first to get a foot in the door and then transition maybe at some point to a paid program? Or is it maybe pursue a Fire One cert at one of those community colleges first and then try to apply to a department? What would you say for somebody that's thinking about it right now?
So I'll give you two experiences our organization have. We used to have a starting date or a starting age of 21, and we thought it was appropriate. We thought it was safe and cautious and everything. We thought, what we realized is we were training these kids in high school, or we were reaching out to them, we were having fun with them, we were starting to engage them. And when they hit 18 years old and graduated high school and they said, "Hey, I want to become a firefighter," and we said, "Great, but you have to wait 3 years until you're 21." And we were losing 100% of those people out of high school. So we just recently were able to lower that age to 18. And ironically, next next week is our first ever high school firefighter academy, where we're doing a week-long mini academy. They're going to become a firefighter light. They're going to learn a lot of different skills in that week to kind of get them engaged, to get them involved. And then at the end of the academy, when they graduate on Friday, we're hoping really that we get all the applications from them and to do that. So we've had to evolve, and this is the first time we've been doing it. I'm hoping it works out really well.
What was the reason for the 21 age minimum before?
I'll leave that to my successor. I think they didn't like the youth or immaturity that they thought was available there. To be very honest with you, we changed it a number of years ago, and I feel like maybe that was completely inaccurate, that our 18, 19, 20-year olds we're finding are learning faster, developing faster, capable more quickly, and honestly promoting at a higher rate because we got them in early and we were able to grow them under our culture versus allow something else to grow them for us.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it was a really good decision on our part.
So as you were progressing along at Elizabeth and learning leadership lessons and adding to your toolkit, your leadership toolkit, what's one lesson that you picked up that was the hard way? And then how has that affected you moving forward?
Oh, man, so many lessons. I will tell you this, as a young leader, what I did learn is be careful what you say, and maybe not right away, but sometime in your career that will come back and bite you. And so you, as a young leader, you have to know that, people, especially disgruntled people, are like elephants, right? And they don't forget some of the things that you said in a younger version of me that probably wasn't under the best intentions.
So was it like something that you said that they perceived as a promise that you never followed through with, or just something in a less emotionally evolved version of yourself that you said and they were like, I got you now.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it comes two different ways. A lot of promises you could make. More importantly for me, I was, as a young officer, making statements like, I will do this, or over my dead body will this happen. And then in reality, you have to eat crow and go, oh, well, I guess that did have to happen. And people remind you of that as a young officer.
Yeah. Yeah. But the words matter. I was reminded recently of one time in the motor pool when I was a battalion XO. I went down there and I noticed inside the motor pool all the parts bins were filled with parts. They were spilling over with parts. And I said, and this was probably a Friday, I said, no matter what happens, by Monday these parts bins better be empty. Right? Guess where all the parts went?
In the trash.
Yep, right in the dumpster of all brand new parts. And I was like, clearly that's not what I meant, but I was giving them permission to do whatever because I said, no matter what, these better be empty. Right. So
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
we put our people in position where they're like, I got to make the chief happy or I got to make my lieutenant happy. And this is what I think he wants.
I know it. I know. It brings me, I don't know if you ever heard this quote before, but this was really this one has hit home. And in fact, I have it taped on my desk here. I wish I could show you, but leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. And that was so profound. Andy Stanley wrote that. And, um, it's so true, right? When you, when we forget as officers or supervisors how to listen to people, or we never learn. That's one of the biggest. We never learn how to listen and hear what people are saying. They're going to stop talking to you.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lesson for me that I had to learn early on. I was Chief Mike Chiamani from Brooklyn. One of the coolest guys I've ever met taught me this, that he taught me listening skills. And I'll never forget when I started to change that, because Eric, what I was doing for the longest time is I was waiting for you to finish talking. And I already had my response. I
Sure.
was like, I'm going to respond. If he'll just shut up, I'm going to respond to him. And what I didn't realize is I truly wasn't hearing the
Right.
message. And so I actually have to remind myself via a sign on my desk to make sure that I know that people aren't going to listen to me or they're going to stop talking to me if I don't listen to them.
Yeah, folks have good stuff to say.
They
And they may
certainly do.
not have experience, but they have ideas, and maybe it's something that you haven't thought of. And it doesn't matter what position you're in and how many bugles are on your collar. If the crews or the people in the department, the members all know that you're listening because you truly value what they're saying, that's going to be a totally different dynamic than you listening, waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah.
And
And
so
and
that's
you know
good.
what? I'm a lazy dude, and I got to tell you, this is the easiest leadership possible if you just allow your people to tell you how to run the organization and work with them and get their input, it's so much easier than having to go home at night and stress about what decisions you're going to make the next day if you just let other folks do it. And that's
Sure.
kind of in the most simplistic form, right? But
Right, right, right.
the reality is if you have input from this team, this group of people that have good input, it really is an easy job.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. That's great advice. What's next on the horizon for Elizabeth Fire? What's coming up for you as you look to the future?
Well, I've got a couple more years left. I'm moving into retirement, a little bit of an early retirement, which is cool. We're gonna go on and do some fly fishing and do things that are cool in life. But what we're working on big time right now is succession planning, execution of that, making sure we have people that are capable of promoting, making sure that those people are comfortable in their jobs so they don't get into it and are failing. So a lot of
Hmm.
acting time, a lot of opportunity to learn other people's jobs. So that's what we're focusing on the next couple of years. I think we have a good organization. I think we have more than capable people that can run it, which I'm super happy about. We just actually went through a tax initiative to see if to kind of offset some of the things that are happening in the state of Colorado with fire protection district funding. And that tax initiative failed by a narrow margin. First time as it's the first time as a chief that I've had the failing tax initiative. So it was kind of a blow to my ego, thinking that maybe we'd shoot this one off by a narrow margin. It actually failed by a narrow margin. And I had to learn a lot during this election about our citizens, our customers, and what's happening in the world and everywhere else. And I've had a lot of good mentor chiefs talking to me about this that are going through the same thing. It's an angry world right now. Are resentful. They're struggling with a lot of things on a federal level, on a state level. What we're finding in the fire service is that we're the local section of government to where they can actually start to make a difference. And I think they're really looking at that resentment and pushing it out on a local level because that's their only vent space, their only ability to do so. So we're recovering from that, building a resiliency plan to see if we can convince our voters that we do need to do something out here to further progress our organization. And that's going to keep us busy for the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, and who'd have thought when you were coming up through the ranks that you'd be pursuing political initiatives on behalf of the department, right? Like you never thought that would be in your job description. And
No way, no way. And what a big learning curve that is. And I can tell you for any aspiring officers that care to listen to this, get involved in that stuff with your department. Go understand it, offer your help for those things because it is a huge learning curve. And the more you know about the process, the better it's going to be for you in the future.
well, and for that thing in particular, the better you can serve the community and do the things that the community needs, especially the way some of the fire stuff is going with new construction materials and other things, and then medical calls as well. That's
Yeah.
needed and helpful. I know when I see those on those ballot initiatives, my first thought is like, I don't want to spend any more tax money on anything, but then I'm like, oh, this is the fire service. And sometimes it really comes down to the way those things are written, right? Like you read them and on the surface you're like, am I understanding this correctly? This sounds good, but what's the catch? And then, you know,
Incredibly complex,
right.
incredibly, and frustrating for us because we want to just tell a story and we want to write the question the way everybody understands, but you have to follow the law. Yeah, incredibly frustrating and complex for sure.
So, Chief, as we're wrapping up here, I got one more question for you. If you could give one piece of advice, you're a student of leadership and you've experienced leadership throughout your career. What's one leadership, either tenant or one leadership principle or just a concept that you could pass on to anyone listening to the podcast here that's maybe stepping into a leadership role for the first time? What's something that you would love them to have at the forefront as they're considering what it means to lead and lead people specifically?
That's a that's a lot. I mean, I could talk all day on this, but here's what I learned. I learned the hard way. You are not going to please everybody, so stop trying.
Mm.
That's critical. Stop trying to please everyone because you're not going to do it. And you don't have to like somebody to lead them. And that's one of the things that we all as leaders need to learn is you can not necessarily love somebody or like somebody a lot. but that doesn't matter. You still have a job to lead them or manage them. And taking that emotion of that out of it is critical to in order to be an effective leader for sure. I think consistency is always big. You have to be consistent. As we talked before about leading your friends or leading, you have to be a consistent leader. And once those people start learning that your consistency is trustworthy and it's focused, you're going to get a lot more followership out of it. People are going to follow you when you're consistent, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
And then,
all great points. I would
of
say,
course, I think the last one and my most important one is humble. Just when you're making a mistake, just own it, man. Or when you don't know the answer, ask
yeah,
somebody and tell them you don't know the answer. And I've learned that you get more respect from your
mhm,
subordinates, the people that are following you, if you just say, I don't know what to do here, you guys. Let me engage me, figure it out. Let's do this. And wow, that's pretty powerful when you do that.
sure, sure. And that goes back to what we were talking about emotional intelligence. I would much rather work for somebody, and I think anyone would, that somebody that's a human being that experiences things like maybe I experience, rather than working for a robot that is emotionless, that
No
can't
doubt.
admit when they're wrong, that claims they know all the right answers, that has the arrogance that instead of the humility like you argue for. Those people, you only get so much out of them. And I don't want to follow someone like that.
No doubt. No doubt. I agree completely.
Chief, I certainly appreciate getting to talk to you today. I looked forward to the date on the calendar when I was going to have this conversation with you, and you certainly didn't disappoint. I appreciate everything that you do for the fire service here in Colorado and for your department there in Elizabeth. You are doing great work, and I look forward to seeing more of that. For our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team or anyone who might benefit from these insights. Don't forget to subscribe to the Convergent Impact Leadership Podcast and leave a review on your favorite platform. For more tools and leadership resources, visit convergentimpact.com. And until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep setting the example.